The Legend of the Gym Teacher. Written by Angela Riteman. Third audiobook edition. This audiobook includes an extra story, Jogging, written by Anthony R. Wilbourne. This book is a work of fiction. All characters, locales, and events contained herein are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance or reference to an actual person, property, locale, or so forth, either existing or not, is strictly coincidental if not confidential. The Legend of the Gym Teacher. Joel and Trina were behind the bleachers and on the floor, trying to talk over the dribbling, squeaking, and shouting of the other 8th graders. Their conversation, which had been waning, turned to the wax-worthy Benita Jones and her most recent episode. Trina said she had heard from a friend that Benita invited, not 2 but 3 boys to her house last weekend. Joel winced and said, "I hear she's got a hairy stomach." "She does," Trina replied matter-of-factly. "I've seen it. She flashed it once." Benita had a reputation as the school flirt. A reputation she perpetuated. Since just last year, she claimed to have experimented with over a dozen boys. Almost incredulously, Joel asked Trina about the boys' reaction to Benita's condition. She, with a shrug, chalked the matter up to one's preference or laxity. "Well," Joel thought, "I think I'd prefer a smooth stomach." The gymnasium in which he and Trina sat wasn't like a gymnasium you'd see in a school today. It had no cameras, overhead windows, or private showers. Just the typical scoreboard, basketball hoops, and taped floor. The bleachers were the old wooden sort. Not the versatile high-tech kind we have now. There were also no cell phones. No easy way to communicate with people outside or look busy when alone. You basically had to either talk to somebody or be talked about by somebody. Joel and Trina jumped. A basketball had crashed into the opposite side of the bleachers. "I freaking hate basketball week," Joel moaned. Joel wasn't very athletic. He played games, but mostly enjoyed ones with the least amount of team dependence. "Like dodgeball?" Trina gasped. She thought she had seen their PE teacher, Mr. Taper, approaching his office. Mr. Taper had a specific routine for his class. At the start of every period, he would have students move to the same set of bleachers, promptly take attendance, warm everybody up with stretches and jogs, and introduce the week's main activity. He liked his students active and efficient, not slow or unfocused. He was a special kind of teacher. The kind who would take time out of his day to talk to you, to help you with a problem, to make you happy. Trina demanded that Joel slide into a nearby recess. A section of the bleachers lay further away from the wall. Mr. Taper probably wouldn't see them if hidden there. While scooting back, Joel noticed some text. A message, dimly lit and crudely scratched on the back of one of the bleacher boards. It read, "Watch out for Mr. Taper." 4? And yes, 4 was written with the number 4. There was no period after Mr. Confused, Joel asked Trina what this was. She responded as if he should have known. After some back and forth, she explained that Mr. Taper might have gotten too close to one of his students. Joel asked his friend to explain. Trina went on to say that, according to what she heard, the student's father wasn't around much, so Taper became a kind of substitute. Eventually, the teacher met the boy's mother. She liked him and started asking him to stay for dinner, which led to the teacher sleeping over. That was when Taper misbehaved. "What was the boy's name?" Joel said. "Darren," Trina said hedgingly. "Daryl? I'm not sure, but his mother found out and pulled him out of school." "And Mr. Taper didn't get fired?" Joel said. "Why didn't he get fired? Or go to jail?" Trina proposed a couple of reasons. Maybe the school didn't want to get involved in a scandal, or maybe the boy's family just didn't want to get Taper in trouble. Joel responded dubiously. He couldn't believe it. Mr. Taper was nice. Harmless. He might have smiled a lot. He might have given students pats on the back, but there wasn't anything intrinsically wrong with that. As Mr. Taper blew his whistle, signaling the end of PE, Trina said earnestly, "Ask anybody." Joel rushed to his locker. After hurriedly entering his combination, he opened the door, grabbed his day clothes and backpack, and ran to the back of the locker room. He stopped at a bench, behind a row of toilet stalls. A passage to the showers was on his right, through an adjoining wall. This was Joel's least favorite part of PE. He suffered from gyno. Initially, he thought his enlarged chest was just his body's way of filling out after having lost weight. Sooner or later, he would resemble the rest of his male peers. But ever since one girl's stupid comment last April, Joel grew terribly self-conscious. He tried to hide his chest by wearing 2, sometimes 3 shirts. He didn't like to undress around people, not even his own family. He couldn't undress in the stalls because he feared people would see his feet, wait for him to come out, or ask what he was hiding. Just as Joel had removed his gym shirt and tank top, 3 boys appeared from behind a set of lockers. They were boisterous, confident teenagers of various heights and builds. One of them was shirtless. They were holding their day clothes and backpacks. They stopped at the sight of Joel's lone presence, then moved to a bench next to the shower passage. Joel dropped his tank top into one pile and reached for a white t-shirt from another. The boys began undressing. Joel looked at the shirtless kid. He couldn't help but envy him. The kid noticed that and tilted his face in the direction of Joel's stare. At his chest, which was flatter and smoother than Joel's. "See something you like?" the shirtless kid said. Joel looked down, seeing his own bare chest and almost dropping the t-shirt he just grabbed. One of the kid's friends hissed. The third boy, seeing Joel's embarrassment, told his friend to "Shut up, idiot." Joel looked up and received the third boy's sympathetic grin and comment of, "Sorry, man. He gets fat in the head sometimes." He proceeded to change into his day clothes. His friends followed. Joel, on the other hand, simply turned his back toward the boys. His back was sweaty, shiny, marked with a few freckles or what could have been small healing zits. Joel put the t-shirt on slowly. He grabbed a dark, heavier shirt next. After a while, Joel didn't know how long, the yapping of the boys ceased and the locker room grew silent. The bell, signaling the end of the period, rang. Mr. Taper, whose office happened to be next to the locker room, saw Joel through a window that lay between the 2 spaces. The teen was approaching the locker room's doors. He looked unhappy. Lonely. The teacher arose, opened his door, and called out to him. Joel stopped and turned around, clutching a strap of his backpack. This kinda sounds like it takes place in the 1970s. Mr. Taper was tall. 6'1", maybe 2. He had brown hair and a mustache. Maybe even the 80s. A whistle hung from his neck. An athletic shirt and shorts covered his body, which was in shape, but starting to show the protruding signs of middle age. He had no ring on his finger. Mr. Taper asked Joel why he hadn't left yet. Using his left hand to grasp his other elbow, Joel stated that he must have lost track of time. The gym teacher sensed deception. Taper put his hands around his back, leaned forward and said, "Is something wrong, Joel? Is there anything you want to talk about?" Joel's eyes dropped to the dangling, almost hypnotic whistle, then back up at the teacher who stood still. "No," Joel said. "Thank you, but I better get to my next class." Taper suspected the teen might have had a problem with his body. Maybe his peers too. He would see Joel run and hide in the locker room, pull on his shirt if it clung to his torso, or disappear during certain activities. Taper recommended that some weight training could boost his confidence. He explained that, on select days of the week, he would allow certain students to spend the period in the weight room, and if Joel wanted to try that, to let him know. Joel said he would. In return, the teacher smiled and squeezed Joel's left arm. He must like me, Joel thought. Taper turned to look into his office, which had another window facing the gym. Students were pouring in for the next class. He turned back around and asked Joel if he needed a late pass. Joel said he didn't, thanked him again, more sincerely this time, and left the locker room. The bell for next period rang. The following day, Joel and Trina reassembled behind the same bleachers. They had plenty to talk about today. For one, Joel explained how yesterday, his math teacher, Mr. DeFries, burned him in class. The story went like this. Joel dashed from gym to math class, arriving late. People watched him rush to his seat. Later, Mr. DeFries gave everybody a pop quiz. During the test, Joel, who was a little sweaty, got up, went to the teacher and quietly asked if he could open a window. DeFries wasn't so quiet. He told Joel to take a shower. It does wonders. His classmates laughed. A blonde-haired boy near the front laughed the hardest. Joel omitted the part where DeFries rebuked the boy in blonde. Although it was conscientious of the teacher to have done that, it was unconscionable to do what he had done to Joel. The abominable Mr. DeFries had cut deep into the pupil's confidence. So deep, in fact, that the wound might never heal properly. "Seriously?" Trina said, stunned. "Did you tell your parents?" "No," Joel replied. He lectured for the rest of the hour. People probably forgot about it by then. Trina responded by saying that, if it had happened to her, she would have said something. Maybe even gotten the prick fired. Joel concurred respectfully, ambivalently. He hated Mr. DeFries, but not enough to risk sabotaging his math grades. They weren't too good at the moment. Trina and Joel's conversation shifted to Mr. Taper. Joel told her about his and the teacher's one-on-one and the squeezing of his arm. Trina's eyes widened. Was her friend becoming Taper's new fave? Although Joel said that he wasn't, he expressed wonder as to whether such a position, if fabricated, would work to his advantage. If it would supply perks like free periods, good grades, or personal protection. The two laughed the idea off. Turning to his chest, Joel said, "How would you feel if I Arnold up? Think I'd be more attractive?" "Sure," Trina said, reconnecting with Joel's face, "as long as you don't turn into a meathead." Joel chuckled and said, "Would you join me?" It'd beat sneaking behind the bleachers. Joel and Trina jumped at the sound of a third voice. An angry, authoritative voice that called their names. They turned to its source and saw Mr. Taper, standing at the bleacher's mouth, looking heated. Joel and Trina looked at each other fearfully. Taper ordered the students to come out and face him. They did. The rest of the class continued their business. Once Joel and Trina were within Taper's hairy reach, he, with that friendly smile many came to know, demanded that they report to his office after school. The students showed up. The office door was open. Mr. Taper was sitting at his desk, reading a paper and spinning a flashy yo-yo. He spun it well. Joel thought it was kind of cool. Taper set the paper and yo-yo down at the sight of the kids, and asked Joel and Trina to enter. He shut the door behind them. Mr. Taper sat back down and said, "Do you two know why you're here?" "For going behind the bleachers?" Joel replied. Taper agreed and proceeded to ask the students why going behind the bleachers wasn't a good idea. Trina gave him a predictable response, that it was against the rules. This didn't appease the gym teacher. He wanted to know how it could affect them personally. Taper turned to Joel for an answer. Thinking of the graffiti, he propounded, because it could encourage us to cut class. Taper liked his answer. Now, he wanted to know how their behavior could affect other students. He waited for either teen to answer. More confidently, Joel said, "Because others might think it's okay?" Taper concurred. Now, he wanted to know what they thought could happen in leading kids to think their behavior was okay. Joel didn't know how to answer this question, for he didn't know how to make an adult understand the complications of a youth. Adults had options. They could leave school if it got too hard. If a kid left school, they'd have to answer to their parents, or worse, the police. Dipping out on basketball to retreat behind the bleachers, as inappropriate as it might have been, was one of the few options Joel had. He didn't do it for his classmates, he did it for himself. Trina was getting bored. She looked at the clock above Taper's head and saw that the time was almost 3:30. She wanted to leave. "Look, Mr. Taper," Trina said, "we're sorry. We just didn't want to play basketball. We honestly didn't think what we were doing was a big deal. Could we drop it? We won't do it again." Taper leaned back in his chair, smiling, not amiably but coldly. Distrustfully. You know, Taper said, kids today might think it's cool to talk back to teachers, but they really only hurt themselves when they do it. Trina shot back, well, do you think it's cool for teachers to abuse their students? Taper demanded an explanation. Mr. DeFries, she continued. Joel's math teacher? Joel facepalmed. Now, he wanted to leave. He told him to go take a shower in front of the whole class. Taper asked Joel if that was true. He confirmed it was. Well, Taper said apologetically, I'm sorry to hear that happen, Joel. You should talk to the principal, but that has nothing to do with what you two did in my class. What if the bleachers closed while you two were behind them? I wouldn't want to see either one of you get hurt. Joel started to ease up. He felt that Taper's concern for their safety signified something good. That maybe he took pity on him and Trina, despite all her smoke. Maybe their punishment wouldn't be an awful one. I'm writing you both up for Saturday detention, Taper said. Joel didn't want to hear that. Life was hard enough having to endure this chamber of confusion 5 days a week. Now he would have to endure it for 6. Besides that, Saturday detentions were long. 6 hours long. He wouldn't have enough homework to last the period. What if he gets in trouble again for talking, or the people there don't like him? Joel protested and apologized for Trina, explaining that she hadn't been in a situation like this before, which differed from what he thought about saying. It's not like we left the building, Joel said. Can't we work the punishment off in another way? Taper declined, expressing that his option was for their own good. Believe me. The rest of the previous week had passed. Monday was here. Joel and Trina were eating lunch. A couple of acquaintances were sitting around them. One of the acquaintances asked Trina about her Saturday detention. She described it as kinda boring, explained that she had worked on assignments she could have done at home, and concluded that, because Joel was there, it wasn't too horrible. Joel supplemented her account by mentioning the conversations he and Trina had with others in the room. Joel personally found the detention sort of fun. He got to chat with people he saw in the halls, but never approached. Almost everybody was away from their usual circle of friends, so as a result, they made their own private little circle, charged by commonalities nobody would have guessed. The experience was a nice change of pace. It almost made Joel forget about what he did the day after his second session with Mr. Taper. Last Wednesday, before first period, Joel wrote a message inside one of the lavatory's toilet stalls. It read, "Taper hurt me." He considered writing something else, but chose the hurt message primarily because of the instrument he used to write it. A permanent marker. His choice of a lavatory was set from the start. It was a convenient, anonymous channel used by everybody, not just gym teachers and PE students. Nobody would know exactly who wrote the message. Suddenly, Kelsey, Trina's friend, appeared. She sat next to her. "Guess who's back?" Kelsey murmured. Trina offered the name of a dream demon whose movies were becoming quite popular. Kelsey ignored the joke and instead pointed to a boy across the cafeteria and replied, "Kevin." Kevin was tall, thin, and heavily dressed. He was handsome but despondent looking. A little guarded. He clutched a tray of food as he walked to an almost empty table. "Who's Kevin?" Trina said. "You know, the kid who slept with the gym teacher." Trina immediately stopped chewing. Kelsey's reveal wasn't only brazen, but incredible. Others in the caf had been glancing and whispering to their neighbors. Joel sat silently as Trina and Kelsey continued to talk. He wondered if Kevin was feeling as embarrassed about his past as he felt about his body. Kelsey expressed that she'd like to question Kevin about his experience and time away from school. Once Joel's sixth period ended, he rushed to try and catch up to Kevin. He had been thinking about what Kelsey said at lunch. In retrospect, the whole thing seemed just a little preposterous. Kevin was here. Mr. Taper was still here. Joel had also been thinking about the bleacher message. Did Kevin write it? Why would he write it if he was coming back? This was a conversation Joel would have with Kevin in private. If Trina saw it, she'd want to know about it, and she, although with the best of intentions, had misused info given to her about Mr. DeFries. Joel had reached the school's main exit. He leaned against a nearby wall, looking casual, randomly peeking back at the hall from which he came. A minute or so later, Kevin appeared. Unfortunately, a group of students got to him first. They surrounded him, unintentionally forcing him against a far wall. Joel cut through the wave of approaching students and into an adjacent hall. He stood around the corner and listened. After some unconstructive back and forth, one of the students commented, "Hey, you think if I hook up with a teacher, I'd get out of school? Don't you like us?" Another student said, "Or do you just prefer dads?" Joel saw Trina beyond a layer of other students. She was walking toward the exit, her head turned, watching the roast. Joel spun around, keeping his back toward the crowd, hoping Trina wouldn't notice him. "Like I've been telling everyone," Kevin replied, "I got busted for smoking. Not for..." He couldn't finish the sentence. For the past several days, Kevin had been trying to tell people the truth behind his disappearance, but to no avail. The truth was that, last semester, Mr. Taper caught Kevin smoking marijuana in the locker room's shower block. A shower block that was typically unoccupied. As a result, Kevin got suspended for the rest of the semester. Joel continued to listen. Trina didn't seem to have noticed him. "Look," Kevin continued as well, "if you want to keep harassing me, go ahead. Have a ball. I know I'm the better man here, because you're all too pussy to talk to Taper yourselves. Just ask him what really happened." Kevin shoved his way through the bullies. Joel saw him march toward the exit. He stalked after him. One of the bullies retorted, but Joel didn't catch what he said. Once outside, Joel called to Kevin. Kevin ignored him. Joel called again, moving toward him. Kevin ignored him again. After the third call, Kevin spun around, ready to fight. Joel wanted to step back, but instead, took a breath and explained that he had overheard his argument with the bullies. Before Kevin could respond, Joel gave his condolences, adding that he understood how it felt to be misunderstood. Kevin gave a small thanks. "I'm not going to ask if what you said is true," Joel said, "but why would people think you hooked up with Mr. Taper?" "I don't know," Kevin said. "Maybe it was one of the guys I smoked with." Joel didn't know what he meant. "I mean, maybe he made up this story so people wouldn't know he was smoking too." "Did Taper catch you guys smoking?" Joel said. "He caught me," Kevin said. The other guy had left. "Left where?" Joel thought about asking. "I was going to leave too," Kevin continued, "but it was too late." Joel asked Kevin what he smoked. Kevin said that it didn't matter. Joel was starting to get it. He could see why the other guy, whoever he was, would have wanted to sever his connection to the incident, because if what he smoked mattered, he would have probably told people about it. Joel had one more question. "Did you carve the message behind the bleachers?" "Message," Kevin said. "Watch out for Mr. Taper." Kevin didn't know this, but it was actually the other guy who initiated the rumor of Kevin and Taper. He, the guy, wrote the message behind the bleachers as a kind of insurance for his story. After stating that he wasn't the message's author, Kevin asked Joel, "Why? Did he?" "No way," Joel exclaimed. The two had become transfixed. The world around them seemed to have disappeared. After a beat, Kevin said, "Good. I suggest you move on then." Kevin walked off, leaving Joel to contemplate whether he should scribble over his message or go home. If he went back inside, would somebody catch him? Would whoever had seen the unscribbled text beforehand see him leave the lavatory? Joel decided to check the lavatory the following day. Before first period, he entered the stall in which he left the message. He didn't expect to see what he saw. There were 3 more messages, seemingly written by 3 different hands. The first message read, "Miss Merrill loves her some Deschutes." Joel found this one amusing, especially the LUVS spelling of loves. He could see what the writer meant. The second read, Blackheart 28 is planning something bad. Bad? Joel thought. Like a burning? The third message made Joel nauseous. It was gross, damaging, and about Mr. DeFreeze. It was, despite its ambiguity, something he wouldn't wish upon his worst enemy. He tried not to heave. He placed a hand over his stomach, wishing the boys who had just entered the lavatory would leave. Joel thought about destroying the 4 messages, but what if there were more elsewhere? Why didn't he take Mr. Taper's talk of leading people to do bad things more seriously? Maybe Joel would have been better off with cameras. Eventually, the boys left. Joel left afterward, leaving the messages intact. Needing more time to think, he began walking toward his locker. Now he's a slave of an unseen presence. Never knowing who watched, is watching, or will watch. Somebody from behind patted his back and called his name. Joel pivoted and saw Trina. She was almost breathless. "You'll never believe what somebody wrote on my locker," Trina said. Jogging. Abby had a good stride going. She had been jogging for nearly a mile and thought she could run another. She jogged for over a mile yesterday, so why couldn't she do 2 miles? Or even 3? She wasn't tired and the morning sun felt nice. In the past she jogged regularly, but recently she had been jogging frequently, almost insatiably. She had acquired tighter skin, a lower weight and smaller appetite, but hadn't reached the state of buoyancy that she wanted. She hadn't achieved that proverbial spring in her step. Maybe the feeling would come after the 3rd mile. Maybe the 4th. She didn't know. What she did know was that her body wasn't the problem. Abby looked up. Maple trees stretched to a clear blue sky, as did the rooftops of several homes. The houses were all different in structure and style. They weren't new, but maintained or modified enough to lend the block a glamour that most buyers would consider valuable. On the street, a fit man with sunglasses was, on rollerblades, walking a dog. Further up the block, a couple of women were pushing a stroller, complete with a baby. On the block subsequent, a person was lying on a dolly, working the undercarriage of an automobile. One of 3 automobiles stood over the grassy end of the driveway on which he or she worked, hugging the imaginary line between the person's and neighbors' properties. Across the street, 5 small children were cavorting while 2 adults were sitting in a yard, enclosed by a redwood fence. Abby wondered how these people acquired so much. Even the rollerblader and 2 women, who didn't appear much older than she, were probably on their way to owning at least 2 of these houses. How were they able to circumvent all of life's little challenges? Challenges that, often, have a nonlinear way of becoming big problems. Working hard, Abby supposed. Staying focused. Watching the money. Abby worked hard too. She stayed focused and out of trouble but had little more than an apartment, home, car, job, mother, and friends. These things were nice but weren't exactly what she wanted. She wanted to teach children again, build lesson plans and instill wisdom in those who would accept it. She would have liked more time with her friends. She would have loved a property on which she could fix a car or throw a party. Most of all, she would have adored a life freed from the love-hate feelings that ruled her of late. Freed from that volatile mixture of contentment, depression and repulsion for herself and others. Since the pandemic, Abby had been running a race in which she got ahead only occasionally. Her bills often ran in first. Something unexpected would happen at the most inopportune time, eating up money she had saved. She would have to get new shoes or replace her phone or renew the tabs. To try and get ahead, she adopted gig work, which was having the opposite effect. The short-term gains, along with her wages, were eventually consumed by long-term expenses, while opportunities to recoup the losses were snatched by other gig workers. She was no better off now than she was over a year ago, when she was laid off from her first and only teaching job. Unless things change, she would probably wind up like her mother, obsolete, hypochondriacal, and alone. Sometime later, Abby reached the 2-mile mark. Her jog led her to a bluff. The edge of the land was paved with a walk, which lay alongside a somewhat busy arterial. Beyond the trees and down the slope was a tract, occupied by a subdivision. The sort in which outdoor activities were often kept at a minimum, and within the confines of watchful eyes. Eyes that were perhaps eager to witness a catastrophe, even toward a member of their community. To Abby, this wouldn't be a good place for what she had in mind. It wouldn't have sufficient impact. She would need someplace more public. Someplace that'd garner more views. This wasn't the first time Abby thought about committing the act in question. The thoughts came as passing curiosities before building into the nagging anxiety from which she currently suffered. She considered extracting the gunk from her mind with counseling, but feared the possible consequences. What if the person listening diagnosed her with something more terrible? What if her confession started a downward spiral she couldn't control? On the other hand, what if these things didn't happen? Would they, including her mother and friends, understand her specific situation? Would they receive what she had to say, however uncomfortable it might be? Well, Abby thought, no more stalling. Do it. Steadily, she walked the mile back to her home. She chose to cut through the residential streets. Because of its easterly angle, following the arterial would have taken less time, but she hoped that someone or something among the houses would obstruct her true path. She hoped that maybe a friendly face or kind word would make her reconsider. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The few people she passed had their attention on other things. Things that were familiar and safe. Abby could have spoken up first, but would they've reciprocated? When Abby reached her building, she spotted a cat perched on a windowsill. It looked down at her from inside one of the upper-floor apartments. Abby watched it slowly blink its eyes as if transmitting a signal. From what she heard about cats, it was a behavior that conveyed interest and compassion. She also heard that they make great anchors during times of distress, which sounded much better than the emotional leash she carried. After a moment of relentless quietude, Abby entered her building and traipsed to her second-floor apartment. Traipsed to collect the tool with which she planned to perpetrate her dastardly deed. In the afternoon, Abby entered the specialties building of Scarborough Medical Center. A lobby lay before her, painted in warm earthy colors. Lit primarily by external light that poured through the glass panes from behind. An information booth was in the center, chairs were to the left and elevators to the right. On Abby's person were a couple of additions to her top, leggings and tennis shoes, a hooded jacket and travel backpack. The backpack lay flat against her back, like a paperweight. Nobody would have suspected that it contained her implement for destruction. Abby approached the elevators, passing by the booth and passing up the attendant's tired but earnest, "Hello." Out of all the buildings within Scarborough's campus, only the specialties building connected with the parking garage. The garage ascended 8 stories, and from the very top, one could get a clear shot of about a dozen residential and commercial buildings within a quarter-mile radius. Moreover, this medical center was a significant hub of activity in the city, and the roads that fringed the campus were major arterials. It would have been very difficult for somebody traversing this structure to ignore whatever serious incident should happen here. A group of people stood in the far right. Among the individuals were a man in a wheelchair and a woman in casual attire holding the chair's push handles. Abby saw about 10 people in total. Although there were 2 elevators, each with a capacity limit adequate for this particular group, only one of them would open at a time, providing space inadequate for everybody to fit comfortably. The group would most likely split up and take turns riding the elevators as their doors opened. Some of the human profusion might even want to chat while they wait. Abby imagined how it would go. They'd chat about the typical stuff, such as their families, errands they had done, or maybe the weather, but probably wouldn't talk about atypical stuff, such as one's bills or angst. Abby probably wouldn't talk about that stuff either if things were different, but as they were, she wouldn't want to concoct a discussion of cozy untruths. It seemed a fruitless scenario. She could talk and lose or not talk but still lose. The bell of the left side elevator rang. About half the people moved to the elevator car. While most of them waited for the man and his wheelchair handler to enter first, one person proceeded anyway. A woman, who remained in place, muttered something to the person next to her. Abby assumed it had something to do with the individual who entered impatiently. In Abby's eyes, the head of the muttering woman had become her own. The lines and blemishes of age vanished, and the hair darkened to a shade similar to Abby's as a child. She was 7, maybe 6. Her brother, older by 2 years, sat across a table from her. Abby's mother sat between them. Some feet away was a woman. Her legs were crossed. Her lap, covered with a napkin. She innocently scooped up portions of a sundae. The 2 children laughed. Abby didn't know why. Maybe it was the juxtaposition of someone healthy with something unhealthy. Or maybe it was the stereotypical image of a woman sitting alone, eating ice cream. Whatever the event, Abby recalled the woman's reaction. It was helpless. Potent. Like internal death. "You shouldn't do that," Abby said to the muttering woman. "Excuse me," she replied. Maybe it was the memory, but the woman's voice seemed louder than it might have actually been. It caught everybody's attention. Did Abby really want to continue talking with her? Never mind. The remaining people, along with those who had just walked up, watched the incident until the next bell rang. When it did, Abby ducked around a corner, entering a nearby corridor. The rest entered the right elevator. Abby didn't look back to see the people's expressions. She only kept walking. Abby didn't know if this corridor connected with the parking garage, which was her ultimate destination. She had only been in the specialties building a couple of times, and during those times, she always used the lobby elevators. She'd see people exit the cars and enter the garage through doors to the north. All of her other visits to the campus took place in the treatment building, which lay across the lot from this building. Near the corridor's end, Abby smelt something spicy and roasted. It came from a cafe on her right. A cafe that was stocked with coffee, drinks, and food items. The shop reminded her of Coughlin and the countless afternoons she spent in the store, doing her schoolwork and sipping the latest espresso while waiting for the bus ride home. She supposed she'd miss places like that, but would she have any memory of them after the accusations? After judgment? Would there even be a judgment? Take a break, Abby, she thought as she went to rest on a bench, kitty corner from the cafe. While Abby stared at the carpet, somebody said, "Looking for patterns?" She raised her head and saw a man with gummy teeth grin at her. He wore a company-branded cap and shirt, dark shorts, and high tops. He had a tattoo of a winking, smirking leprechaun on his right arm. He appeared to be a delivery person. "No," Abby replied impassively, counting crosshairs. Since she would probably have no memory of the man after the event, what was the harm, Abby figured, in responding? "Oh. Are you a shooter?" "What?" Abby replied sharply. "You know, a practitioner of the Second Amendment? Bearing arms and all that?" She noticed the man's attention turned to something at her side. Her backpack. She grabbed at it, not remembering how it got there. "No," he persisted, looking up. "Wait. You're a gamer, aren't you? Fortnite, maybe?" "I'm a jogger." "Right on. I'm an aspiring jogger." The man patted his belly, which jiggled. "But the food baby I'm carrying makes it kind of difficult." Abby drew back, almost self-consciously, gripping her backpack. "If I were a sponge," he continued, "I could just squeeze the fat away." I shudder to think where it'd come out. The man laughed. "Hey, you're funny." Abby smiled dubiously. "Would you like some company? I was going to have lunch in the cafe here, and I hate to interact with my phone for a half hour." "Well, Abby was leery of his intentions. "I'm a good talker. I won't get offended if you don't think so." Abby recalled the mutterer. "All right." The man uttered a word of enthusiasm and stepped aside so Abby could arise. Once on her feet, she followed him into the cafe. Another man passed the pair. The cup he held smelt of fresh coffee and cinnamon. Name's Elton, the man beside Abby said. Like Elton John but without the culturedness. Low-key guitar music filled the cafe. What's yours? Abby. Abby, huh? I like it. Short yet effective. Was Elton flirting with her? If he was, it wasn't exactly the kind of attention Abby was seeking. As Elton approached the prep counter, a cook greeted him. She wore an apron, disposable gloves and hair clip. A smile of expectancy was on her face. She and Elton engaged in conversation. The two seemed to be acquaintances. Abby stood silently, uselessly, like an inoperable third wheel. Like anything? Elton asked Abby. Okay, this guy's definitely flirting. She turned to him and said, I'm good. Elton smiled and viewed the menu above. He requested a breakfast burrito. The cook, whose name was Mindy, went to make Elton's order, shouting burrito to the cashier, while he turned to a cooler, grabbed a Sprite and turned again to the cashier's counter. Abby followed Elton there. Another, younger, woman was manning the register. She didn't talk as much, and at one point checked Abby for a sign of what Elton might have seen in a woman who didn't appear to be his type. Elton paid for his meal and took the Sprite to a table only a few feet away. Abby took a seat opposite Elton's, gently setting her backpack on the floor. The uniformed stranger removed his cap and opened his beverage. The equivocal jogger had begun, unconsciously, fiddling with her ponytail. So what brings you to the hospital, Abby? Elton said. She watched him raise the Sprite's neck to his mouth. I have a doctor's appointment. Elton gulped. Oh. When? In an hour, Abby said, thinking her and Elton's conversation would end before then. In this building? No, she replied, releasing her ponytail, in the treatment building. I like to wait in this building. It feels less like a hospital. I gotcha, Elton said with a nod. I deliver packages here, and one of my favorite things to do is roam the halls. They're so peaceful. Like you're getting back to nature. Try that in a store or restaurant, and they act like you're going to wreck the place. Is that what you were doing? Roaming the halls? Elton had taken another gulp. Not exactly. I hate the roads downtown, so I sometimes leave my truck in the loading zone out there while I stop here for lunch. I hate the roads too. Downtown looks more and more like a human wasteland every day. Elton caught Abby looking down again. This time, she really was looking for patterns. Her eyes jumped from one randomly placed linoleum square to the next. From one color to another color. Reaching shorter or longer each time. Elton. Mindy said. He turned toward the cook. Your order's up. Kay. Elton turned back to Abby and said, won't be a minute. Abby watched him rise and go to the prep counter. He and Mindy shared a dialogue whose words Abby couldn't make out. In less than a minute, Elton returned to the table, equipped with a steaming burrito on a small plate, fork and butter knife. Mindy had gone to help another customer. Abby contracted her lips, eyeing the food. You sure you don't want anything? Elton asked Abby. I don't want to look like a pig. Maybe later. Shrugging good-naturedly, he cut into the burrito and said, So what do you do? I'm a provider network specialist. What's that? Using his fork, Elton bit down on a piece of burrito and chewed. On paper, I assist healthcare providers in processing insurance applications, but in practice, I feed data into a computer. Normally at this time, Abby would have been working, for today was Monday. She called in sick, which was a difficult decision. She wouldn't need the job if she followed through with her plan, but would if she abandoned it. Ah, Elton said, having swallowed. You like it? Not really. I'd rather be a trainer, but that spot isn't available. I work from home though, which is kinda nice. Elton detected an upward modulation in Abby's voice when she mentioned her desire to train. In his mind, it opened a door onto a path of discussion. Have you looked into other trainer jobs? He cut into his burrito again. Yep. All I've been able to find are substitute teacher positions. Like at a school? That's good, isn't it? Elton wasn't familiar with the world of teaching, but assumed that, because it required a degree, a position in a school was less obtainable and therefore better. He had taken another bite. It can be. You get experience and a chance to work with the kids. Why not try those? They're not full-time. I'd have to add them to the bucket of jobs I'm doing already. Abby's modulation had started to fall, returning to that dry, familiar intonation. Besides, she continued, subbing isn't so easy to get into now that the pandemic is over. At least not here. Another gulp. Where then? Oh. Abby was having thoughts of returning to the corridor. Maybe out west somewhere closer to the coast. I'd move, but I can't really afford to right now. Elton thought that maybe this was the wrong path to take. His suggestions seemed to have only been frustrating her, so he decided to adopt another tack. One that was safe, commonplace. Is your family here? Another bite. My mother is. My father, well, I don't talk to him much. Abby's father divorced her mother shortly after her brother's 18th birthday, but agreed that he would keep in touch with the family. It wasn't long before his visits became less and less frequent, for he had met another woman. Any kids? Pets? No. Abby wasn't charmed by this kind fellow, but could see he was trying. Maybe I should try too. How about you? She said. Any children? The leprechaun tattoo. Exotic pets? Another gulp. A son. Oh. Something had touched Abby. Was it jealousy? Sympathy? Yep. His mother's still around, but pretty much out of the picture. Abby crossed her arms. Elton saw this. Was he finally getting her attention? He had less than 20 more minutes to find out. I don't mind though, he continued, setting his fork and knife down. People like her tend to wipe their dung onto the shoes of others, and I've been doing a fine job of raising him myself. Abby thought of not her father but her neighbor. She allowed her children to park their cars overnight and without validation stickers, despite her building's policy of tenants having to display said stickers on their windshields. If she was a responsible mother, she'd educate them on the policy, or at least inform them of the risk of having their cars towed. Abby assumed that it was generational, that the kid's behavior was what the neighbor picked up from her own parents. Want to see a picture of him? Okay, Abby replied. Elton pulled a napkin from a small basket on the tabletop, swiftly wiped his mouth and hands, and after dropping the crumpled cloth, reached behind him. From his back pocket came a wallet, and from the wallet came a 2x3-inch photo, which he passed to Abby. She grabbed it. The boy in the photo looked 12 or so. His face was unusual. She suspected a developmental disorder of some kind. He seems nice, she said, returning the photo and crossing only one of her arms. Elton looked down at it and responded, Yeah, he's great. It took me a while to realize that. What do you mean? Well, for a while I thought like her. My ex. I thought she had done something wrong, or I had done something. I guess we were like many parents. We expected a normal child. Is he okay? Does he sneak out okay? He seems to. He gets a little hyper at times, but he's receiving treatment. Elton returned his son to the safety of his wallet, resting back down on it the way a hen would rest on its eggs. Abby lowered her arm and crossed her legs. What does he like to do for fun? He loves speed. I built him an electric bike for his birthday, and he's hardly put it down since. That's something we like to do together. E-bike around the neighborhood. I try to discourage him from popping wheelies, but he does them anyway. If it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be here talking with you. Abby lowered her legs unintentionally. She tried to minimize her action with a congenial response, but Elton already picked up on her sensitivity to something he had said. But he's like most people, you know, he continued. Like you. Like me? Sure. He's a boy who doesn't let his disability keep him down, and you're a teacher who doesn't let life's unfairties keep her from jogging. Heck, even I'm guilty of trying too hard. I'm a delivery man with dreams of starting a business. A business? Abby got her modulation back. What kind of business? I've been thinking of starting a delivery business that'd cater specifically to people in Penske. Penske was the town in which this region's university resided. It was approximately 20 miles from where Abby and Elton were sitting. While delivering for this company, Elton plucked his shirt just above the company logo to clarify. I learned how difficult it was for the people out there to receive deliveries. They told me how the gig workers wouldn't accept their requests, so I did a little digging. I interviewed several drivers, and they told me that they weren't paid enough to drive to Penske and back. So I thought, why not just have a local service? The driver wouldn't have to worry about using up miles to get back home, and stores nearby could enter the online marketplace. That's not a bad idea, Abby said, recalling that the additional miles were why she never delivered to Penske. Have you started any part of the process? I've been communicating with this guy who knows how to build apps, and he seems interested in the idea. A few small stores seem interested too. Maybe after I get another vehicle, I'll move out there and drive solo for the company until others want to jump on board. Well, I hope it works. Elton's bean persuaded Abby to spill one of her own. I've been flirting with an idea also, she said. Really? Elton dropped his head into his hand and, in a comic fashion, rested the index finger and thumb on his chin. Pitch it to me. All right. You know how annoying it is to have to waste gas on air conditioning? I do. Well, what if there was a vent built into your windshield? A vent you could open or close. You could keep cool and save gas. Ah, and all the lizard people with tinted windows could stay in the dark. Abby hadn't considered that, the possibility of people using their windows for privacy, yet replied, Right. I like it, Elton said, lifting his head. I really do. Have you tested it? She didn't expect him to take her idea seriously. Not yet. I know how to cut glass. But do you think I should? How would I get started? Well, I'm no expert when it comes to inventions, but there's this thing called a patent. From my understanding, it'll keep people from stealing your idea while you finish developing it. Suddenly, Abby began to regret her decision of sharing a potentially profitable idea. How long would it take to get a patent? Not as long as it would take me to get it, Elton said with a wink. Abby slumped back in her chair, breathing discreetly. Besides, I got enough on my plate, but you seem to have something good cooking. Maybe I do, she said cheekily, playfully. Sure you do. Elton pointed his thumb toward the prep counter and whispered, like, see that lady over there? Abby looked ahead. Mindy was transferring frozen sandwiches from a box and into a cooler. Her pace was languorous, carefree. She hates her job, but has been saving to pursue a writing career in New York. She's only working here because her last employer closed. You know what came out of it, though? Facing Elton again, Abby shook her head. A $1,500 settlement check from a lawsuit against the employer. Wow, Abby replied, flabbergasted. Yeah, and the receptionist out there. Elton pointed toward the lobby. She and her husband just got approved for a house. This boded well for Abby, for the receptionist looked older and probably didn't make much more than she made annually. The teacher-turned-data feeder might still have a spot on that serene block. So you see, there's a lot more to people than you might think. I suppose there is. Abby looked down again, not at the floor, not at the table, but into herself. I guess I just needed to be reminded of that. Although Elton was succeeding in his Abbygate investigation, he still didn't know what was really bothering her. He stumbled upon his watch. His 30 minutes were up. Damn. What? Abby said promptly. My lunch is over. Oh, like the imperfections one eventually overlooks after meeting someone several times, Abby had looked past Elton's delivery uniform. His announcement brought it back. It brought everything back: the cafe, the hospital, and the corridor that led to her doom. Right. Having gotten up, Elton noticed the lunch he failed to finish, which was a couple inches of burrito and half-empty bottle of Sprite. He thought about asking Abby if she'd like the rest of it, until he remembered that he had offered her food twice already. While looking down, he saw for the second time in what seemed like a long time Abby's backpack. It was lying on the floor, next to her chair. What's in there? A gun. Will you be okay? Abby's eyes didn't follow his. I'll be fine. Thank you for the company. Elton. Hey, she remembered my name. Anytime. Elton grabbed the Sprite and left the table. The burrito remained. Mindy would collect it, eventually. As Elton approached the exit, he turned and said, "Will I see you around?" Abby turned also and joshed, "You'll probably see me on the funny pages." That was good enough for Elton, or at least, he hoped it would be. He wanted to know more, but in the same respect, didn't want to assume the worst. Assuming the worst about people can lead to intolerance, division, or war. With a chuckle he replied, "Just watch out for those crosshairs." "K. He's sweet." Elton dumped the Sprite into a trash can and exited the cafe. I bet he'd burst into a fountain of hearts. Hearts and glitter. Bye, Abby said, not expecting him to hear her. She continued to sit at the table, processing the rather odd encounter. She had trouble accepting the result. On one hand, she got what she wanted, a kind word, but on the other, she didn't. Despite Elton's teaching and Abby's handling of the situation, she felt that things hadn't changed. The world was still full of losers like her and winners like her neighbors. It was still full of people who produced more often but didn't succeed, and those who produced less often but did succeed. Although some people, like the cook or receptionist, might receive lucky breaks, they were usually infrequent and inconsequential. They would come and go, just as people would come and go. Only those who were serious, truly serious about change, could provoke society into making it happen. If I'm gonna lose, Abby thought as she grabbed her backpack, arose and exited the cafe, let me do it right. She proceeded to the West End elevators, which were closer and less busy than the lobby elevators. Abby hit the call button. Her car appeared in less than a minute. Upon entering it, she noticed that the operating panel had buttons for all floors except the 6th and above. She hit the button for 5 and moved against the wall that faced the panel. Back in the corridor, a woman in scrubs walked determinedly toward the elevator. Abby expected her company, but the car wouldn't have it. It began closing its door just as she was about to reach the elevator's threshold. The woman, perhaps realizing that she would lose the race, lowered her pace. Floor 5 introduced Abby to another corridor. A longer, less narrow passage, interspersed with closed doors, seats, and signs. She exited the car and proceeded forward, noticing several other things. Chief among them was a recurrence of blue on the walls and carpet. The blue seemed to have at least two purposes: to break the monotony of tan and brown, and to indicate specific information. Like the green on signs along a road, the blue symbolized guidance to certain facilities or offices. In lieu of windows was a bright incandescent light. Instead of people were several artificial plants. Abby continued walking eastbound until she encountered a door with a thin vertical window. She had seen the elevators and what appeared to have been an exit to the parking garage, but was sidetracked by the indistinct voices that filled the halls and her ego. The distraction wasn't enough to spoil her anticipation of the end, however. That feeling was irrevocable, stimulating, almost purificatory. There was also a kind of curiosity floating in her mind. A curiosity that impelled her to look through the door's window. A stairwell was on the other side, providing ways both up and down. Ways that maybe the elevators didn't provide. From outside the specialties building, Abby had seen 8 floors, 7 parking levels, which included the ground level where people entered the garage, and an 8th final level with few windows. Although she planned on ascending to only the highest parking level, if she could reach the roof, she'd have a higher vantage and make a greater impact. The stairwell led to a room on the 8th floor that Abby wasn't comfortable entering. Through the window of the room's door, she saw an assortment of equipment. Electronic equipment, maybe. It wasn't likely that such a place would have been empty, and if it were, it would probably be armed with a security camera. Maybe even a sensor that would trip an alarm when somebody touches the door handle. Abby had no time for that. She exited the stairwell at floor 7, continued westward and stopped at a shorter hall with 2 facing elevators and in the middle a door, revealing the parking garage. Funnily, she hadn't run into anybody on this floor either. Upon opening the garage door, Abby was overtaken by a rush of sensations. The warm, humid air felt like a wet blanket. The wind and automobiles, like a malfunctioning vacuum. The level's aperture, like a tunnel's end. The light from outside the garage was bright, almost white, which normalized to a blue as she drew closer toward it. Beneath the blue, to the west, was the city of which she knew, and before that, a network of blackish-brown threads forming tiny squares. She reached out to the net, rubbing it between her fingers. It was fibrous, elastic. Not totally tough, but attached to a guardrail at the floor and a concrete beam by the ceiling. This wasn't going to stop Abby. She had come all this way. Turning back would only make her always wonder if the good things that happen were just fate's way of propelling her to another hospital. Having moved to the level's corner, she saw a gap between a pier and another net, facing north. She pushed the second net aside. There was just enough room for her to get something through. She looked around before climbing over an inner guardrail. Nobody was present. Having landed in the cranny between the outer and inner guardrails, Abby closed her eyes, breathed deeply and clutched her backpack over her chest. Upon opening her eyes, she saw the city a second time. It didn't quite look the way she imagined it would. The streets weren't swamped with traffic. The lots and sidewalks weren't flooded with people. The sky was devoid of birds and aircraft. There weren't a great many around she could hurt. Abby looked further, beyond the campus, beyond the residential and commercial buildings, and into the green confetti-like landscape of the city's central and northern sections. Places where other people, interests, and businesses lay. Would they notice a fatality downtown? Would they even care? Sure, they might see it on the web or TV. They might talk about it in a shop or at the elevator, but would the incident really affect them? Would it hit home, even if it happened at home? People saw people die all the time, but what if Abby killed herself? Her mother, friends, and even father would live with the question of what they did wrong, and she wouldn't be around to provide the facts. She wouldn't be able to grace the world with her invention or ideas that might arise along the way. Nope, Abby thought. She twisted around and dropped her backpack over the inner guardrail. Carefully, she clambered back onto the parking level's floor, picked up the pack and sauntered back to the entrance of the specialties building. Once at the door, she stepped to its side, opened her backpack and reached inside, pulling out the one and only item. A note that read, "My name was Abigail Short. A person just like you." With a smirk, she ripped the paper to shreds and dumped the pieces into the trash can beside her. This has been The Legend of the Gym Teacher and Jogging by Angela Riteman and Anthony R. Wilbourne. Brought to you by Google. Book copyrights 2024 from 1613 Productions. Audio copyright 2024. Third audiobook edition, March 2025. All rights reserved. Other stories currently available from 1613 Productions include Faster Reacting Toys, The Hungry Man, and The Legend of Built-in Obsolescence. Thank you for listening.